bit about me. So I am a registered herbalist in Ontario. I've worked for the past 24 years as product development specialist at Faunus Herbs. I also organize conferences, herbal conferences, for the last 12 years, and I teach. And you'll see that a lot of herbalists do a lot of things, so in the herbal world. And I love every minute of it, but my heart's work is my sanctuary. So we have an at-risk sanctuary here on the farm, and we also are rewilding. So Tamara and I have a lot in common in that aspect. We both are loving the wild plants and having nature surrounding us, so that's great. So I know I'm normally the one that insists to Abra that we need a joke to start, but tonight, I actually have a little story to start. So no joke, sorry, but I definitely will still get Abra to do that. But it's just such a little cute little story that, you know, has to do with Goldenrod. So there was a legend about two little girls who were super close friends. One was always with the other, and they were never apart. The one had golden blonde hair, and the other was dark-haired with beautiful blue eyes. They were afraid that when they grew up that somehow they might be parted from one another. And so they didn't want to grow up at all. And so to solve their problem, the two girls set out one day on a long adventure to visit a good witch who lived across a field. So they came after a long day of travel to see the good witch. When they arrived on her doorstep, they told her of their wish to always be together. And the sad part of the story is that the little girls were never seen again. But whenever you see the golden yellow bloom of the goldenrod, you'll be sure to find the sweet blue aster right beside her. So I thought that was so beautiful, because here in Ontario right now, when goldenrod first blooms, we have Queen Anne's lace with her as a companion. But once goldenrod opens for a little bit longer, then the blue aster, the aster will be right there alongside her, and it's such a beautiful combination. And actually, when my daughter was little, she's now like 32 or something, when she was a little girl, I painted her bedroom after goldenrod and asters. We did purple and yellow, which sounds yucky, but it was so cute when she was little. So, you know, I have this little affinity to that yellow and purple and those wildflowers.
Yeah, that sounds really beautiful.
So, okay, so I'm going to start right in. Nice, Tamar. Had you heard that story? Has anyone heard that little story before?
Let us know.
You know, I only ever saw it written once. I've never, like, it's not. Yeah, let us know in the chat, because I have never seen it anywhere else. But I thought that it was such a lovely little story to share. So when I was saying at the beginning there how goldenrod, it's a wildflower, not a weed. And my favorite quote of, well, I have a lot of favorite quotes, I'm a quote lover, but is by Wayne Dyer. And he says, the only difference between a flower and a weed is judgment. And I think that that's a really good quote to remember, because judgment is, you know, the important factor of all the negativity. So when you think of goldenrod, think of a beautiful wildflower. And it's also really ecologically an important plant. It shows up on the land in the process of restoring back to a forest. So I am lucky enough to have a lot of goldenrod here. And it's interesting to note that since I brought this in the house, right now I have 2 flies all over it. So it's like I'm attracting the flies that have got in the house onto the goldenrod. So I'm sure I could sit that out in the kitchen and have the flies go to it, and then me carry it gently outside to release them. So it's important because, as I was saying, it helps, it grows up on the land in the process of restoring back to a forest. It's food, of course, for our bees and other pollinators. And also, I don't know if any of you have seen the galls in the stem, that, you know, insects also live in the plant. So it's interesting to see what a vitally important home it is to insects and parasites, and as well as food. And it's interesting because even the doctrine of signature, which is interesting to think, for me to remember this plant, it has a great benefit on the urinary system. And when I was first learning herbs, I know I just totally associated yellow, like yellow pea, with urinary. And it helped me every time I saw the yellow to think pea. But also it's kind of interesting to think it's a late bloomer. And perhaps you're drawn to it because you yourself are a late bloomer, you know, and sometimes we are. And that's kind of cool too, I thought, to even think of that. So its botanical name, it's a Solidago species. And in Canada, there's over 100 species, which is quite amazing to me. And you can use these species, they have similar properties. Canadensa is the one that mostly is growing on our property in abundance, the Canadian goldenrod. But it's also known as other words, common names, as woundwort, and Aaron's rod. And it's an asterae family. So if you had an allergy to asters or any plant in that family, it could be problematic. But again, it is not the plant that causes you allergies at this time of year. And I'm not sure if Tamara was planning on talking about that. But I think I'll leave it because I think she's going to. So I'm reading her face. I'm thinking, I think that she wants to. So the description of it. So you can see, as I have some here with me, and Tamara also has a picture of it, a better picture, but you know how the yellow flowers come out. And I also have, here's one not in bloom, just to get an idea of it. And then here, of course, is in bloom. And here is a sample of it, you know, just before it's opening. I really love this plant. And this is actually my first cup of tea I'm having this year of my goldenrod I'm sharing right now while we're having this talk, which is great. So I really recommend you all to get out there and pick after this, to pick some goldenrod after this talk and get to know it a little better. So let's see here. So the flavor, it's such a good flavor. It's one of my favorite cups of teas. It kind of has a little bit of an anise taste, but I just think it's a delicious tea. And to note that the pollen on this is a very heavy, when we were describing the plant, the pollen is very heavy and sticky. So it is not a wind-blown pollen. It is one that we need, that the insects are used to pollinate it. So just to keep that in mind. And also it reproduces, it sets seeds, and it also has underground runners. So usually you see a colony of it somewhere, or you see like a field of it. And basically here I have, my fields are sparsely, that are regrowing, they're just sparsed with goldenrod, which I personally love. It is found, it's interesting because it's found in dry areas, but it's also found in moist areas. And on my farm, I have it all over. And it's found in the sun, it's found in partial shade, and also there's a couple species that actually are in the forest. So it pretty much goes everywhere, which is quite lovely for us and lucky us, because it is free medicine. And I think it's really important to understand that we have access to free medicine around us. So you don't have to just have money and access to plants. If you can go out into the wild and learn to forage a little bit with these safe plants, then you too can just make your own herbal products at home for you and your family. And you know, you feel empowered by that. I always did as a young mom. I felt really empowered to think that I could take care of my children and my family with some simple remedies. The parts used. So we use, when I make tea. So I made a cup of tea, and actually I'm going to show you my tea, because in my teapot, and I'm going to pour it so you see how yellow it is. I'm hoping you can see that. Can you see how yellow that is? I don't know if you can, but it's very yellow when it's beautiful color, golden. But I would use about this far down. I include some leaves in mine, as well as right up to the flower. And also when I'm making a tincture, I would do the same thing. I would use, I would cut and put it in. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment, but we can use the flowers, the leaves, and the roots. So in making the tea, again, in that pot, all I did was cut off here, and I put it in with hot water, and I let it steep for 10 minutes. And you can discard the plant if you want out of the pot, but it will just keep getting stronger if you leave it in there. But if we made a tincture, I would just take a jar. That would be a lot of tincture for one person. So you don't need, I would just take this and I would just cut it, and I gently fold it, and I would stick it in my jar, and I'll use more of the plants. And then I have alcohol in this jar, and then I would just fill it, just to about there. And then you would let it steep in a cool, dark place and make your medicine after about 6 to 8 weeks. And sometimes you can steep it longer. That's perfectly fine. And you would strain it and squeeze it if you needed to. And then you've got a nice tincture. So it's pretty easy to do home kitchen medicine. And tomorrow we'll touch on doing a bit of medicine making as well. So we just really want you to feel empowered when we're teaching about these herbs, for you to go out and make some things. So of course, now's the time for you to do that. And you have this period right till fall to do it. So it'd be a fun time to experiment. You can make hydrosols, liniments, oils, ointments, salves, poultices, teas, tinctures, all kinds of things. So it's a perfect plant for beginners. And I believe it's a perfect plant for beginners, not only because it's easy to make just teas and oils and tinctures, but it's also one of those herbs that has a lot of uses that you'll be able to use in your apothecary, because you don't need a lot of complex medicines in your apothecary to start. So with this particular plant, it's great for colds and flus. It wouldn't be, as a clinical herbalist, that wouldn't be my first choice, but as kitchen medicine and home medicine for my family, because I have it in abundance and it's free outside, I would definitely use it. And also I love the taste of it myself. So think of it for colds and flus and for upper respiratory issues. It's a great one. Also, as I was saying earlier about the color yellow, so for urinary issues, it's a diuretic. It helps as an anti-inflammatory for the kidneys and conditions such as bladder infections, cystis, and also it helps relieving gas pain and weakness of the bladder. So it's just a really great one to think of that. And interestingly enough, it also contains quercetin, which is a powerful antioxidant. And a lot of people today are trying to get more antioxidants into their diet in different ways and from different plants. So this is a great way to add a different plant into your diet that contains antioxidants that are also a natural antihistamine. So of course that's for the allergies. And I'm gonna let Tamara speak more about the allergies. So it's just a great one. And let's see. So allergies, I'm gonna let Tamara speak on. Gargling.
Good if you want.
It's great for gargling. You can make it. No, it's okay.
Right.
We can gargle. So I can have my tea here and start gargling. If I was talking a lot and needed to ease my throat, or if I had laryngitis or a sore throat. So that's just a really good one to know as well. And it also is good for any type of candida fungus, and vaginal or even oral thrush. So it's just and also it's great to know you can take the leaves here and do a spit poultice. So when they say do a spit poultice, you know, you just pull some leaves off, you chew them up and get them all nice and juicy, and then you would put it on, you know, an insect bite or relieve a sting or a burn. So usually when people are learning about herbalism, everyone kind of knows to use plantain as a spit poultice. But this is also a great one. And where this is growing, I don't have plantain growing, so it's kind of cool that you're out, and there's tons of bees and pollinators on these plants. So if you were out near these, there would be bees. So it's a great one to keep in mind, that you can just chew it up and have a nice spit poultice. And also it's great for a painful toothache. So if you were out camping as well, it's a great plant where to pick to put your campsite near, because then you know you've got this medicine all right there near your campsite, which is quite fabulous. So you can chew on the root. It's chewing on the root for a painful toothache.
Oh.
And also you can make a hydrosol of golden seal, or sorry, goldenrod. It's a strong anti-inflammatory and mild antispasmodic for sore muscles. So that's really important to remember. Let's see here. Essential oils. So goldenrod is used as an essential oil. However, I've kind of been trying not to use essential oils very often, and I'm trying to ensure that when we educate, that teas have so much less of an impact on our environment. Essential oils use tons and tons of plant material, water, you know, everything to go along with that billion-dollar industry that essential oils has now become. So it's not that I'm an essential oil hater, because I'm not. I feel that they really have their place. But I just feel that as it's moving mainstream, people, and there's so many companies that have that pyramid scheme, which are teaching people wrong information and telling them to ingest it and put it right on your skin, when all that info is not good. So I just really want to emphasize that. So fabulous medicine if you go to see an aromatherapist, someone who is trained in aromatherapy, but not something to be purchased and just have willy-nilly around the house. And it's not good for your babies, and it's not good for pets. So keep that in mind. So let's see here. The tincture. So I showed you how to make the tincture. Food uses. Just to know too, when you're out on the trail, you can pick those leaves and eat those leaves, which is great. And there's micronutrients in all different green plants, you know, so just spread the wealth. Try all kinds of different plants that you know are safe. So this one, you know, is safe, and it's a great one that you can just try. And also you can nibble on the flowers, which is wonderful. And they look really pretty in salads. It just adds that color. You can add it to egg dishes and to muffins. It's a pot herb. You could even blanch and freeze those for in soups come winter. Sometimes what I do is make teas and freeze ice cubes, and then I add ice cubes to my, you know, soup stocks and stuff throughout the winter. But it's a great thing to do. Let's see. It's also been used historically as dye. So that's cool. I personally have not tried dyeing anything with goldenrod, but I don't know if any of you guys have had. Yes, Nikki says it makes a beautiful dye. That's excellent. So let's see. Folklore. This is my favorite part. I love folklore in medicine. And so this here tea became people's favorite go-to tea when the Boston Tea Party was on. So when the people revolted, the American colonists, and they dumped all the tea into the Boston Tea Harbor, this became the tea of choice for all those teetotalers. And so it was called Liberty Tea. And I just love that, to think that maybe that's why I love it so much, because I come from a teetotaling family, which is quite excellent. So yeah, I thought that was pretty fascinating. And something I just recently learned, which I love and I'd never heard of before, was that this little plant right here has a lot of latex in it. And it was used to make rubber. And so in the 20th century, when rubber trees were actually in decline, in serious decline due to disease, Thomas Edison thought that if he could find a plant that had a lot of latex in it, that he could make rubber for tires. And so he worked and he produced a program, and he had a 12-foot Solidago plant that he could use to be a source of rubber. And his friend Henry Ford actually delivered him a Model T vehicle with tires made from the goldenrod plant. So they actually were tires. And I thought that was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then during the Depression, the work was kind of forgotten, you know, and then, but in World War II, the government did use Edison's formula to make synthetic rubber belting and water bottles. So that's even kind of cool. So it would be really neat if people could rethink of ways that we used plants, you know, that we can reuse them again. And earlier in the talk, I was telling you that one of the other common names was Aaron's rod. Well, that word is used because it was used as a divining rod. So they would have stripped the leaves off, and your diviner, and they come off really pretty easy, right? And I should try it sometime. Actually, I've never tried divining for water.
Yeah.
Well, as a kid I did, but that doesn't count because you're just playing. Have you, Tamara, divined for water?
I have not. But
have you, Tamara?
No.
Okay.
Well, I'm curious now.
Yeah.
It would be good to try.
But they say it had to be the right person, that not everyone could divine for water. Right. So it's just interesting, you know, to try and to see. And I know that some well drillers still divine for water. And interesting, when I just stripped the leaves off that, do you see that little gall starting already? You see it right here, which is interesting. So little bugs already in there. And also, just another belief is when a goldenrod grows near your house, that its occupants will have good fortune, which is kind of cool. And still another holds that whenever goldenrod grows, that there can be found a buried treasure. Well, then I have buried treasure all over my land, which is lovely. So I feel like that's a lot of info right now. And then if we have enough time at the end, if there's more info needed, I have a little more info. So Tamara, thank you.
That's great. That was a really good practical load. I mean, you know, so versatile and so many ideas. And you know, actually, before I get into what I want to say, I think I want to just go back a little, because there were some questions in the chat about what you were talking about, Penny, when you well, as I go back, I see that when you were talking about the essential oils, Nikki just said, say it louder for the people in the back, because you were talking about how we should maybe move away from emphasizing essential oils. And I guess she agrees strongly. So there's that comment. And there were some questions about making tinctures. So Summer asked, how long for tincture? So I guess how long do you infuse, macerate your tincture is probably what she's getting at.
So I do 6 to 8 weeks, but sometimes, you know, I leave them much longer. But also if I need a tincture sooner, sometimes I may sneak some of it at 4 weeks, but I would gently, so here I'm going to put in some more in my jar. I would gently, you know, have my lid on, and I would be going back like this during the day, you know, at different times, just moving the plant material around. Plus, right now I'm showing you that I'm, you know, just folding it over and putting it in. You could cut that into smaller pieces, which is great because then it'll be able to break down faster if you wanted the product faster. And then again, just fill up to about here with your alcohol, and you can use brandy or vodka. And remember, you must put a label on it because so often we think, oh, I remember what's in this jar. And then you've got jars floating around and you do not know what's in those jars. So you definitely want a label. And even if you don't have really pretty labels or something, you know, you can use this painter's tape. This is great for labeling. And you should put the date when you picked it and made the tincture. And remember, tinctures, at where I work, where we're a contract manufacturer, we say a tincture is good only for, how long do we say? 4 years. But the thing is, I myself at home, if I know I stored a tincture well, definitely 10, 15, possibly even 20 years, you could use a tincture if it's stored well. So it's just knowing that. And so remember, the dates that are on tinctures are best before, really. That's what it's meaning. It doesn't mean, yeah, they're called best before dates, but it doesn't mean it is no good. It doesn't mean it's expired because, you know, herbal medicine years ago, people would have medicine kicking around for a long time. Or you can't miss a harvest. What if this year, you know, one particular season, you could have a bad harvest of something. So you definitely would love to have an extra jar of something that you can carry over to the next year. So it'd be nice to make a nice little apothecary of some basic herbs that you can have at home. And this definitely, of all those little uses, is a great one for beginners. So that's what I really wanted to emphasize, was the making your own medicine with tea. And like tonight, I'll have tea left over. I could freeze those in ice cubes if I wanted. And then, or I could pop it into a soup or a stew this winter. You don't have to get rid of your things right away, your old tea. You could also have the ice cube, instead of a spit poultice, you could use the ice cube right on a bite or a sting. So be inventive sometimes with your stuff, like try to keep it and not waste it, your products you make.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
So it was your screen keeps freezing, but your speech is clear. So you were describing what to do, okay, and everybody got it, but they didn't see everything that you were doing. And I think, like when you were saying you pour the alcohol up to right about here, and we couldn't see what right about here was, but I'm gonna guess that that's sort of just to cover the herb in alcohol is what you were doing.
Yes.
Like the herb is covered.
Yes.
Is basically what you're going.
Yes.
So, and then also,
yes,
Elena was asking what percentage of alcohol do you use? But probably just, you can use vodka or brandy, right? We can use 40%.
Yeah, yes, that's perfect.
Yeah, that's what I would use anyway, even with other choices. 40% is a good percentage for Goldenrod, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then, yeah. Deborah's into the ice cube idea. So for little bites. Yeah, I like the ice cube idea too. It's great. It's lovely. Oh, oops.
Yeah.
I got off my okay. So yeah, I think that was it for the questions around that. And probably, yeah, I mean, I might get into some of the stuff again or like revisit, but I also have more to say. So I want to let's see, I want to sort of start with the vision of Goldenrod. You know, Goldenrod, so it's flowering right now. It's just starting to flower. And right now where we are, you know, it's 7:35 p.m. and the sun is just starting to set. And I'm sitting in the spot in my house where I get to see the sunset. You can see a bit of the sunset here on me, those rays, and they're really long rays. We're getting into that time of year where we're approaching the equinox, and the rays of sunlight get so long, and the period of sunset and also sunrise are really extended. You know, it feels to me, you get this period of really, you know, orange glowy light that lasts for a long time. And I really associate that light and this season, of course, with goldenrod. I really like to think of it as kind of a sunset herb. And so I mean that obviously by the color of the flower, which is, you know, a dark yellow sort of orange color, and it resembles a little bit, you know, the sunset. So there we are for a second. You can check out the sunset flower. And then also, you know, in comparison, other yellow flowers that we work with, you know, in herbal medicine, I can think of in the earlier spring, you know, we have the dandelion flowering. And the dandelion opens up when we've had a little bit of springtime, and it's kind of responding to the sunlight, the early sunlight of the season. And so it's a bit like a sunrise flower, and it brings a lot of energy. It cleanses the liver, and as a liver cleanser, it gives you motivation and gets you going for the new season, clears out stagnancy that might be stuck in there. And then we move through the season, and then another yellow flower that I love and work with quite a bit comes around the summer solstice, and that's the St. John's wort. And so St. John's wort is really, you know, it's responding to like high noon. It's up for a short time in the really, really bright time of the year. Where the days are long, but you don't get the same kind of really drawn out sunsets. And then we get to the late in the season goldenrod. And it takes so long for it to bloom, and then finally, after such a long period of growing, it blooms. And so as Penny was saying, it's a late bloomer. And it can be medicine for the late blooming type. And as a late bloomer and as a sunset herb, it also lingers. You know, goldenrod starts flowering around mid-August, getting into late August, and it carries through often all the way to the autumn equinox, you know, in mid-late September. We get a good full month of flowering goldenrod. And so, you know, like Penny was saying, now it's got the Queen Anne's lace as its companion in the fields where it grows in the early part of the season. And then as the season progresses, it will have its companion with the purple New England aster, and you get the really beautiful display in the fields of both of them, which the honeybees love. And as someone in the comments was making reference to Robin Wall Kimmerer in her book Braiding Sweetgrass, that she was inspired to do her thesis, her PhD thesis on working with goldenrod, on studying the relationship between goldenrod and the New England aster. And one of the gems I think that came out of that study was the idea that seeing that honeybees are drawn to, there is a larger concentration of bees. I don't know if it was only just honeybees, but I think, anyways, a lot of pollinators drawn to the fields that were full of both New England aster, the purple, and the yellow goldenrod, versus areas where there was just one of those two flowers. Where they were together, they were more concentrated, and showing us that that when there's cooperation, even though these two flowers are competing in a sense for pollinators, because they need those pollinators in order for them to reproduce. So you would think they wouldn't want to be near each other for competition, but actually by being near each other and sharing their space, they both drew more pollinators and became more productive. And so that idea that if we cooperate with each other rather than compete with each other, we all really can win. So that's a nice takeaway from that. Now, getting back to the sunset flower. So, Goldenrod is taking us into the fall season. And it's gathered all this sunlight from the whole season of like the spring and then all the way through the summer. And then it expresses it finally in late summer, moving towards the equinox into fall. So as the light starts decreasing and the temperature starts decreasing, we get goldenrod flowers. And the medicine is part of its medicine, the way I see it, is that it's helping us to prepare for this season where it's going to be colder and darker. And it's helping us to prepare for a time where we're not going to be all outward and expressive and engaged. Like the season of spring and summer is all upward and outward. It's very kind of yang moving, and now we're moving more into the yin season of fall and winter, where we contract and we want to, different beings might hibernate, and we're going to spend more time doing inside work and sleeping more. And we are moving into a time of more of nourishing ourselves rather than expending energy outwards. And the goldenrod's really helping us to prepare for that time of nourishment. And it really does help us to do that. It really can help us to prepare for nourishment because it's slightly bitter, and the bitterness will tone our digestive tract and help us to absorb nutrients that we take in so that the foods we eat are more nourishing. And it's also really gently, but really deeply warming. It really, really can penetrate and warm the whole system. And in doing that, when there's warmth, then there's less contraction and a little more expansion. In our tissues, they're a little more expanded. That means they're a little more open to taking up nutrients and allowing blood circulation to move through, versus when there's coldness and there's more contraction, and it can be a little bit harder for nutrition to get through. So it's laying the groundwork. It's getting our body ready for this darker time. And it's really, really influencing the digestive area, the solar plexus area, with all that yellow sun energy, supporting our digestion, our nourishment, but also helping to be sure that we take in enough nourishment by clearing out wastes that we don't need. So it's also a bit of a depurative herb, a herb that will help to cleanse the whole system. And it's a pretty helpful lymphatic herb. So, that's always, the lymph system's always going to be clearing out debris from the system and making sure that we are cleaner and therefore healthier in a lot of ways. Now, in this season of gathering in and preparing to nourish and preparing to store, right? All the plants and everything, all of us, all the animal, everybody's getting ready to hibernate. Everybody's canning. We're canning our foods and pickling our foods and drying our herbs. And, the plants, the perennials are all they're getting ready to send all their nutrients down into their roots full of starches where they'll store under the ground for the winter. So there's all of that happening. And when we do that, we might also come up against this sense of, do I have enough? Is this enough? And maybe a bit of a sense of fear, like I don't know if I'm going to be nourished enough. Or maybe a tendency towards, hoarding, like we all remember the toilet paper run of spring 2020, right? We didn't know if we were going to have enough, and people just hoarding so much stuff so that other people didn't have enough, and there wasn't necessarily an even distribution of stuff. And luckily, eventually we sorted it out, and obviously not everybody behaves in that way, but that is a human tendency to feel fear that you might not have enough. And then in that case, sometimes you're taking in too much, and it actually can be a burden on you. And I think that the message of Goldenrod is also one of that you you can relax, that you actually do have enough. But this sense of fear that comes with it, I think on an energetic level, it relates to the fact that Goldenrod is a really, really important medicine for the kidneys. And that's one of the primary ways that that we can work with it. That's how I work with it a lot in my practice. And on a practical level, I work with it for bladder infections and kidney infections. And it warms like the sun's warmth. It moves in and it warms and dries up infection. And it's diuretic, so it helps to clear out, you know, through the urine, any infection that needs to be cleared out. Um, and it helps the kidneys to function more optimally. The kidneys are scales. They are the body's mechanism of determining what do we need to take in and what do we let go of. The kidneys scan the blood and determine which minerals are in here that I need to take up and which wastes or excessive minerals or whatever am I going to excrete through the urine. And all day the kidneys are doing this. Always determining what's the proper balance, what is just enough, what is too much, what is not enough. And always engaging with the whole body in order to maintain this balance of nourishment in and waste out. And so so in that way, I think, you know, in Chinese medicine, there's this connection between the kidneys and the emotion of fear. That's the associated emotion that goes with the kidneys. And I often think that's part of the reason, because the kidneys are working with, do I have enough? You know, do I have too much? You know, with the issue of maybe I don't have enough, and that type of fear. And so the goldenrod moves in and it warms and it relaxes and it helps to establish a more proper function of the kidneys. And on another level, it can help to lift the spirits and make us feel less afraid and more relaxed that, you know, everything we need is provided for. That long season of flowering that provides for so many pollinators and that provides for us as well. If you're away for a couple weeks, you can come back and then you can harvest the goldenrod. You didn't miss your harvest. You know, that is a message to us that it lingers, it lasts, it's there for us, it's available for us. And somebody asked earlier, does it dry? Well, yes, it dries beautifully. And so we can dry it for tea, keep it on hand in the winter. As Penny was saying, we can make tincture with it. So many different ways that we can preserve it. One of the things that I like to do with it is I like to preserve it in oil. I have this this tall jar of infused oil with goldenrod, and this is actually from last year. I have not strained it. I've kept it just as it is. I will strain it when I'm ready to use it. I haven't gotten into it yet. So I make infused oil with goldenrod flowers and leaf tops. I chop them up and I fill a jar with them. Really like smash them in there so it's very full with flowers. And then I pour oil, any kind of oil you can use. I use sunflower oil often, but you can use olive oil or grapeseed oil or any kind of oil that you like. Pour it over it and let it be completely covered by the oil and put a lid on it and let that jar sit out in the sunlight. I leave it out on a picnic table that gets sun all day for at least a month. You can let it sit longer if you like and let the sun infuse through that oil, and you get this yellow warming infused oil, which I will sometimes turn into a salve, and it works wonderfully as a topical, like for cuts and scrapes and things that you might use a salve for. It will help the wounds to heal really nicely. And I also use it a lot for inflammation and sore muscles. It makes a beautiful massage oil, really nicely warming and penetrating. So that's another thing that you can do with it. And then again, it's warming and relaxing. If you're feeling all contracted and afraid, you can relax and know that it's going to be okay, and allow the nourishment that's around you to come in. Allow yourself to be nourished. So it's a beautiful thing. Now, this issue with with fear, coming back to that again, I just wanted to tell a story that that's a pretty important story for me. Oh, and in terms of if you can ingest the the infused oil, someone's asking, you could ingest it. I don't usually though, because I make it pretty potent. So I usually just like to use it topically. So yeah, so goldenrod exists also as a homeopathic remedy. And so as homeopathic remedies, we use the Latin name. So it's solidago, like the spelling is like solid ago, SOLIDAGO. And it's not that common, but it has been proven in homeopathy, and it has a really, really important role. Now, I learned about this at a really key time where I was in acute fear. And what was happening was that my beloved cat, my magic black cat that I had for many, many years, she was going through kidney failure. And she was actually at the end of her life, but she was at home with us. And I had taken her to the vet, who helped me to understand that this was in fact the end. And the vet said she's very dehydrated and she needs fluids. And the option was, we can give her an intravenous, electrolytes, but she'd have to stay at the vet overnight. And to me, that was absolutely 100% not happening, because I wanted her to be with her. So they said, well, then the other option is that you can give her fluids subcutaneously, and just attach the little fluid bag, like just stick a little tiny needle under her skin and it goes in, and you can administer the fluids at home. So that was what we did. Brought the fluids home. I had never done this sort of thing before. And when I gave them fluids to her at first, they went in, I gave her probably too much, definitely too much, so that she became really, really bloated. She got all this edema. Her belly was totally bloated, and she was in kidney failure, which meant that she couldn't urinate. So it was really, really horrible to see, and she was really suffering, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And I work with homeopathic remedies a fair amount, especially with animals, because they're very safe. And if they don't do anything, they don't do anything, but they're not generally going to cause harm. So I have this homeopathic reference book that I look to see what can I do in kidney failure. And I discovered, solidago, goldenrod, homeopathic, is the homeopathic catheter. They called it the catheter. It will get somebody urinating when they can't urinate and they're in kidney failure. So I didn't have solidago homeopathic, but I did have solidago goldenrod tincture. So I prepared my own homeopathic remedy with the goldenrod tincture. And to do that, it's pretty simple. It's really just a homeopathic remedy is just really, really, really diluted tincture, diluted so much so that it seems completely irrational that it should have any effect at all. And it's not just that it's diluted, it's also, there's a process of succussing the remedy, so that you're sending this energy through the bottle, through the water, and it energizes it. Anyway, it was a real leap of faith for me to make a homeopathic remedy by myself. It was going to be a very low potency because I could only do so much of it. But I very, very quickly and frantically got my tincture, went and did it, diluted it, succussed it, and gave it to the cat. And within an hour, she went to her litter box and she had the longest, most intense pee ever, and it was solved. And I was so grateful, and I was so grateful that I had the goldenrod, that I had this book, and that I learned this. And it took a little bit of time, but I held out hope and went for it. And lo and behold, we had exactly what we needed to give her comfort at that time. So I'm forever grateful to her as well for that teaching moment that we had, and I suspect she was pretty grateful to me at that time for getting us through that period. So that's a really good thing to know, because those situations are acute and intense, and solidago homeopathic can work magic. and even if you make it yourself. So I now realize I can make homeopathic remedies out of any of my tinctures pretty easily. And that really opens up a whole new world of medicine, which is wonderful. So on top of all of that, the only other thing I want to mention, because Penny left it for me, was to talk about the allergies, to say that goldenrod can be a remedy for allergies. It has, as she mentioned, quercetin, which is a really important constituent in working with allergies. And it's really great for upper respiratory actually infections of any kind and inflammation and stuff, like she was talking about using it for colds and flus and such. So you can make goldenrod tea, fresh or dried, for allergies, and it can work really well. Or you can take the tincture. And it is always confused with ragweed because it grows beside ragweed. And the thing is that the pollen on goldenrod is the rich and heavy and aromatic, and it can't send its pollen out on the air. It's much too heavy. The ragweed that has these tiny inconspicuous green flowers that no pollinator is going to be attracted to because they don't look like anything and they don't have any aroma. So it sends its pollen out on the air. It's an air pollinator, whereas goldenrod is more of it attracts pollinators to it. So so the air pollinators are the ones that the wind pollinators are the ones that we need to be concerned about for allergies, and ragweed's a big one. So they often grow side by side, and the goldenrod gets blamed because that's what everybody sees. In fact, often people will call goldenrod ragweed the same name, like as though they are as though they're the same plant, and they're really not. And not only that, but the remedy to the culprit, the remedy is growing right beside the culprit. The culprit that causes the allergies of ragweed has its remedy right there beside it. So so that's what I got to say about that. And do we have questions, comments, thoughts? I haven't been looking at the chat or anything as I've been chatting. So where are we at?
Well, Tamara, Summer had asked if you used the alcohol tincture for your homeopathic remedy. That was correct, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I can't get into how you do it right now, but it's actually quite simple. It's really just a tiny amount of the tincture diluted in water and then diluted again and diluted again. Like I said, to the point where it really makes absolutely no sense that it should work. I was thinking, I'm giving my cat water that I shook up a few times that had a little bit of tincture in it a long time ago and has been diluted. But homeopathy is mysterious and wonderful and effective. And it's there to show us, at least in part, how much more we need to learn about this universe, I think, that we live in. So yeah, no problem.
Tamara,
yeah.
Also there was one other question, Tamara, and it was who asked this question actually? It was Brittany who asked that her son has pretty bad allergies this time of the year. She's thinking it's the ragweed. Do you have experience in children using goldenrod effectively? And so I mentioned about using local honey with goldenrod.
Good idea.
But what do you think?
I think that's a great idea. That sounds perfect to me. Local honey with goldenrod. So maybe goldenrod tea and honey infused with goldenrod, something like that. I don't know.
And so the next question is, do you dry the goldenrod before you make the tincture or the oil? I'll let you answer that.
Do you dry it before you make the tincture oil? No, I do it fresh. I love to work with the fresh plants as often as possible. And with the goldenrod, it's still hot and dry enough when it's in flower that I find that I can harvest the flowers fresh and infuse them in oil, and they don't go off for me. Some other flowers that I harvest earlier or later in the season will, and I can't infuse them fresh in oil. But with the goldenrod, that's not a problem. I use it fresh for everything unless I dry it for tea. What about you, Penny? You use it fresh or dried?
Yeah, I use it I use fresh for everything. And also when I would be making an oil though, I would allow it to wilt for a while to get some of the moisture out of the plant, just to help prevent mold. So I do that, you know, just for a couple of hours. I would let it wilt on the counter before I put it in the oil. Now, do you let it wilt first, Tamara?
I don't. I actually just put it in fresh. The only thing I really do with it is I go through it to make sure that there are no insects in it. There are these beautiful yellow spiders you sometimes find in it. And they really blend in with it. It's amazing. These chameleon spiders, I don't really know much about, and other insects. So I try to make sure that I see, if I see insects on the flowers at all when I'm out harvesting, I don't flick them off and take those flowers. I say, that's your flower, you got it first, and I don't harvest that one. So I go and harvest ones that don't have anybody else already on them, because they have as much right to them as I do, right? But inevitably sometimes insects come in and I didn't see them, so I go through and sort that out. And then yeah, I don't wilt it, I just do it fresh. That's worked out for me. What's the reason for wilting it?
Just to help with excess moisture, which could be a breeding ground for mold.
Right.
So I was curious. So some people do and some people don't.
Right.
But I wanted, Tamara, I was wondering, because it's now just after 8, it's time to end, but I just thought it'd be really lovely to end on the note that you just said. And that is that the insects have every right and as much right to the plants as we do. And I love it that you decide to leave, if you visibly see an insect on it, that's theirs. And it's funny because when I went out into the field this afternoon to pick those when I got home from work, there was a bee on the first one I saw, and I was like, oh, isn't that nice? And I walked on, not thinking, oh, I'll leave it, but that's exactly what I did.
Right.
So I love that you brought that to our attention. So thank you. So have fun, everyone, doing your goldenrod harvesting.
Have fun, everybody. Yes. And thanks for participating. And thanks, Penny. And thanks, everyone. And thanks for all the thanks. And we will be back. I don't know if there are any more pop-up webinars this month. We've done a few here over the summer. And I think that we actually, the next one is going to be a full-on serious one on preparing for immunity for the new season, and it's going to be the first Wednesday of September, like the either the 2nd or 3rd, whatever that day is. So it's always on Wednesdays, and now that we're moving into the season of monthly webinars, it will be the first Wednesday of every month, pretty much, I think. So that's when you can keep that in mind, and we'll be promoting it on our Facebook page, Herbalists and Herbs, pretty soon. And then if you're interested in checking out more of what Penny's up to and about her, she's at theginkgotree.ca. So I'll write that in the chat. And theginkgotree.ca. And I'm at hawthorneherbals.com. So Penelope Boudreau, Tamara Siegel, theginkgotree.ca, hawthorneherbals.com. So check us out and be in touch anytime, and come back for the September webinar. It'll be a blast. Some good info too. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.